Smooth 98.1. It is gone past 6:34 Monday morning, and this is a Business Express on Smooth Breakfast. I'm Sope Martins, and for the next 15 minutes, I have got Kelvin Emmanuel in with me, the CEO of Dairy Hills Limited, and we're going to be talking about the Monetary Policy Committee, who's going to be meeting for the final time this year. Kelvin, how are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you. How are you, Sope?
I'm good. You know, start of the week. What can you do? So people join this conversation. We're already streaming live up on youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos. I know you YouTubers are there already. So leave your comments on the live chat to get into the conversation. If you're listening on your radio or wherever else it is you like to listen on, you can send WhatsApp messages into 0809 440 981. If you're from out of the country, then use the country code 234 +234. And then you can also use Twitter. We are at Smooth981FM. Use the hashtag Business Express 981. Got that one right. All right, Kelvin. So let's get into this now. So as the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee meets for the final time this year because Christmas is coming, what domestic and international factors do you think they're going to be considering?
Well, I think going into the final MPC meeting, the central bank will take an appraisal of the fact that over the last 12 months, the inflation rate has gone up by somewhere around 5.45 to 5.5%. I have to confirm that number. They also have to take into cognizance of the fact that over the last 12 months, they've had to raise the MPR, monetary policy rate, by about 4.5% from 11.5% to where you have it at around 4% actually, 15.5%, which means that the rate at which the central bank gives out more money to the commercial banks is at 16.5% because the rate is usually 15.5%, the MPR plus 1%. They have to take into cognizance the fact that you have an inflation level at 21.09%, which I question, which I actually believe is higher.
And you've been holding that line.
Yes, yeah. I hold on to that line. The numbers are higher than they are saying it is. They have to appraise what the impact of the new Naira redesign policy, which I do not support. I think is a smokescreen that distracts from the main issues. The quantitative easing has risen to $49.2 billion because in the month of September, the CBN still opened the tap and gave the federal government 749 billion naira. They have to appraise the impact of too much cash supply on the inflation in the economy and how fast it is for the naira to lose 100% of its value. They also have to provide forward guidance on the exchange rate because we have an exchange rate crisis as it stands going into an election year. That is causing a lot of cataclysmic impact on the economy. So I think these are the factors that are going to be frontline in the conversation for the MPC going into the last meeting for the year.
Oh, wow. Okay. And with all those factors making their way into the pot of soup, what kind of decision do you think the MPC is going to come up with tomorrow?
Well, given the report that the numbers are up to 21.09% and 23.73% or 74%, which I doubt highly. I think if the Monetary Policy Committee decides to raise the MPR, they won't raise it more than 0.5%. It's going to be between 0.25 and 0.5%. It's not going to have so much impact on the interest rate, asymmetric interest rate corridor, which is basically the difference between what they call the standing deposit facility rate and standing deposit rate. It's basically like the difference between the rate at which commercial banks keep money with the central bank and the rate at which central banks borrow money from to the commercial banks. So that's the rate corridor. The more the MPR rises, the more that corridor widens, and the more it creates this incentive for commercial banks actually keep cash in at the central bank with the overnight interest rate, and the more they are prone to bring it back to the real economy. But when you consider the fact that the cash reserve ratio, the CRR, is up to 32.5%, which means that a third of all the monies in the banking system was requested by the central bank to be brought back to the vault of the CBN. You begin to question if the central bank really wants the commercial banks to lend money to the real sector and expand the economy, because we have a situation where we have a demand pull issue. Yeah, we also have a situation where there's too much of cash in the system, in circulation. Now, the argument can be, but the Naira design policy will call back cash back to the banking system. The question you have to ask is, based on global precedents, is it a bad thing for you to have cash in the real economy, considering that more than half of your economy is informal and is not in the banking system? That's the question you have to ask.
Right. Okay, now let's talk IMF, because they've been saying a lot about Nigeria, but they have expressed support for our policy tightening, aka raising rates. So what do you make of this stance?
Well, the thing with IMF, I read the guidance, the notes that the IMF wrote about the Nigerian government. It basically records the popular theme, records what the World Bank advised Nigeria a couple of months ago when the VP was in Washington. IMF basically talked about the importance of removing the PMS subsidy, which is a scam, because more than 30 million liters of the PMS, they say, is consumed in Nigeria on a daily basis. The government cannot provide empirical evidence to back it. I stand by it anywhere. You can quote me anywhere. The Nigerian government cannot provide empirical evidence to back the fact that today in Nigeria, 66 million liters of PMS is consumed on a daily basis. I stand by that fact. Okay. IMF talked about the exchange rate and the fact that the reason why people are not bringing in foreign direct investment to register a certificate of capital imports with NOTAP is because of the difference between the official market and the parallel market. It talks about the importance of floating the currency to converge the rates. It talked about government revenues, and it talked about the fact that today, as we speak, the government spends 118 kobo for every 100 kobo in government revenue servicing debt. It talked about how unsustainable it is for the government to keep adopting a fiscal strategy that relies on debt as a means to cover budget deficits. It talked about ways and means lending, that window where the central bank is permitted to apply what they call quantitative easing or printing of money out of thin air to borrow the government in line with Section 38 of the CBN Act of 2007. You know, these are popular themes that the World Bank, the IMF holds, and it's not surprising at all. So when I read the paper, I was like, it's pretty much in line.
Okay. And do you think, now let's talk borrowing costs and inflation and other metrics. How much do you think the monetary policy rate has of a material impact on these things?
So the monetary policy rate is like a tool that the CBN uses to try to slow down inflation. You can see that difference between the MPR and the inflation rate, which is what they call the interest to inflation yield curve, is basically somewhere around 5.59%. The CBN historically has always maintained like a difference in that window of somewhere around 4 to 4.5%, which is the reason why I believe that if they decide to raise the MPR tomorrow, it will not go above 0.5%. If they decide to raise it and they don't keep it at where it is, you know. So for me, I don't think raising MPR to cool down a rising inflation rate is sustainable, because it means that the more you keep the inflation keeps going on, which I expect to continue, the more you keep raising the MPR, and the more capital becomes expensive for companies to be able to produce and slow down the demand pull effects of inflation in the economy. So it's a double-edged sword.
But hold on, though. Let's take a look at economies like the UK and the US, which, you know, we like to take a look at whenever we're discussing stuff like this. So how is it that the rates over in those countries have more of a transitional effect on those economies than we see happening here in Nigeria? Like, what are we missing?
Because the US, for example, is global leader, the number one economy in the world. Last year, the US government, the IRS, generated $4.5 trillion in revenues. You can imagine that the US government foreign aid budget for last year is $41 billion, which is more than all the revenues the Nigerian government got, or just his foreign aid budget, money he gave out to foreign governments. And if you consider the fact that the US is a global reserve currency, yes, and it's a legal tender in more than 175 countries in the world, you understand that whatever the US does has an impact because you have all kinds of funds. Most of the creditors, pension funds, institutional investors are from the US and from the city in Canary Wharf in London. So
Okay, fine. I get the US. What about the UK?
the UK,
I
the
know
UK
legal tender in 175 countries.
pre-Brexit, the UK outside of New York was the financial capital of the world. The city has about $600 billion in transactions that go straight on a daily basis. So it's a major financial center. The London Stock Exchange is one of the top 30 stock exchanges in the world. So it has a serious material impact. What decision they reach out in monetary and fiscal policy in these two countries has a serious material impact in what happens in emerging markets. And unfortunately, when Jonathan was president, the former global head of macro and markets for Goldman Sachs, Jim O'Neill, had classified Nigeria, the same person who coined the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, had classified Nigeria in what they call the N11. Unfortunately, Nigeria dropped out of that index, and you can see that Nigeria dropped also out of the JP Morgan bond index. So the Nigeria was a leading country in emerging markets, like coming up to play in Middle East, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. But the economy has deteriorated significantly. GDP has not gone anywhere. You can see that the report release says that 60% of the population is a multi-dimensional poverty. They don't end up to 1 million naira a year. So a year.
I read that it was eye-opening, heartbreaking.
So the Nigeria just fell off the cliff. I mean, it fell off the cliff because you have a Federal Executive Council where, if you look at the effect, you don't have more than two people who really understand economics. Unfortunately, how can you have a government where people who are the highest level of decision making in the federal government do not understand basic economics? So you have them making decisions that are actually counterproductive to the success and the growth of the economy. The success of any country is not in how privileged a few people are. It's in how good the lives of the critical mass of the people are. And you can see that 63% of the people are in poverty. They can't feed.
Boy, I can't believe that's where we're going to have to end this conversation on because of time. But keep it going because there's more that Kelvin has to say. But you'll have to keep it going up on social media, on Twitter, where we are at Smooth981FM. Tag us in your tweets and find Kelvin at RealKelvin07. Yes?
Thank you, Sope.
All right, Kelvin. I want to say it's a pleasure, but man, you brought me back to the multi-dimensional poverty. We need to consider these things. We need to see. I mean, those numbers, when I saw that 63% of the population.
The essence of a government is in guaranteeing that some basics are operational: food, clothing, shelter, electricity, healthcare. That's your social contract. If you don't provide these things for the poorest of the people, the government is a failure. Basically, there's nothing more to it.
All right, go tackle him up on his Twitter at RealKelvin07. Kelvin, I will see you on another Business Express later on in the week. But till then, have a wonderful day and a wonderful